Hello and welcome to the video about the heterozygous advantage. This is going to be one of the shorter videos that you've seen, so you'll probably be happy about that. So the heterozygous advantage describes an instance in which the heterozygous phenotype, whatever it may be, has a higher relative fitness, meaning it survives and reproduces more, than the homozygous dominant or the homozygous recessive genotype. So for some reason, the heterozygote has a survival and therefore reproductive advantage compared to the either big R or little r people. Okay, we're going to describe a real example of this, one of the examples of this is the heterozygous advantage and sickle cell anemia and malaria in Africa. So we talked about sickle cell anemia. Sickle cell anemia is a genetic disease where you have it's actually caused by a substitution mutation that causes hemoglobin to fold wrong, and as a result, the red blood cells are sickle-shaped, and they don't carry oxygen as well, and they also can they tend to clump together and can cause clots. Now, malaria is a disease that's prevalent in Africa, and it's carried it's caused by a protist. And what the protist does is infect red blood cells. In actuality, the single-celled organism, which is called a protozoa, it's a class of animals, is actually carried by mosquitoes. So mosquitoes carry this small single-celled eukaryotic organism, which then the parasite moves from the mosquito to the human and can get into red blood cells and cause them to explode, essentially. Early symptoms of malaria are fever, chills. It can end in death and eventually respiratory distress because due to lack of oxygen or unable to carry red blood cells. Oxygen in red blood cells. Now, so here's how the heterozygous advantage works. If you have all regular shaped red blood cells, because you're homozygous dominant, all your red blood cells are normal, and they all can be infected by malaria or by the parasite that causes malaria. However, if you're heterozygous, half of your red blood cells are sickle-shaped, and half of your red blood cells are normal. So, as a result, you're resistant to malaria because there's not enough red blood cells that the parasite can infect, because they can't infect the sickle cell shaped red blood cells, and you only have a minor bit of sickle cell disease. So here you're both resistant to malaria and have less severe sickle cell disease. So you sort of have the best of both benefits. And here, someone who's AA is resistant to malaria, but they have the sickle cell condition, which can be fatal. So again, why is it an advantage to be the heterozygote? Because by being the heterozygote, you're both resistant to malaria, but don't have severe sickle cell disease. And again, the reason that is because the malaria can't infect the sickle-shaped red blood cells. It's also important that the heterozygote in general is important because it keeps the recessive allele in the population, or it keeps the allele that's not as favored in the population, so that if an environmental change comes, that trait can come back. So, for example, let's say there's some sort of illness that affects only brown-eyed people, okay? And maybe there's only brown-eyed people in the population. But because some of those, or a majority of the people are brown-eyed, okay? But because some of the brown-eyed people are heterozygote, they keep the blue-eyed allele in the population. And that's important to keep genetic variability, which we know is important so that natural selection has more traits to act on. Again, so the heterozygote keeps the recessive allele, or the least advantageous allele. It doesn't necessarily need to be the recessive allele in the population, so that you do not get rid of the allele completely. Alright, do the 2 guided questions. I hope you are enjoying the weekend, or probably Monday.